Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order and we'll get moving. Julie, would you do a roll call?
Yes. Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Dance,
Here.
Mr. Peterson,
Here.
Ms. Goodman, Mr. Bergstrom,
Here.
Mr. Gentili,
Here.
Mr. Suda.
Yes, here.
Okay.
Okay, everybody's had a chance to review the agenda. Any changes? Or is it adequate the way it is? I see no changes needed.
You need a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes, if you would, go ahead.
So move.
I'll second it. Roll call, Julie?
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Suda.
Yes.
Is that you, Jeff?
He's the one that muted his phone, so I'm assuming it probably.
Okay. Okay, we're all set. Next item is public comment. We have no public, so we're going to pass on that. Just note that we don't have any public here. Okay, the next item is the minutes for the May 18th meeting. I assume everybody's gotten a copy of it, had a chance to review it. If there's any comments or changes, let's speak up. Otherwise, we'll go forward.
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes as presented.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Motion has been made to approve the minutes of the May 18th, 2020 meeting. Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Yep. Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the May 2020 accounts payable. I hope everybody's gotten a copy, had a chance to review it. And if there is any questions, so let's break them out and hear the questions or comments. Looks to be pretty straightforward to me, nothing standing out, glaring. So if there's no comments or questions, do I hear a motion to approve it?
I'll move to approve paying the accounts payable.
Do I hear-
Support.
Okay,
Who supported? Mr. Dance?
yes. Billy, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Dance.
Yes.
Okay, the next item is the May 2020 financial statements. And again, I assume everybody got a copy of it, had a chance to review it. If there's any comments, changes, whatever may be necessary, go ahead and speak up and we'll address it and talk about it. If it looks okay for everybody, to everybody's satisfaction, do I hear a motion to approve as presented?
Motion
So
approved.
moved.
Okay. Who made the motion there?
I think Jeff did.
And you seconded it, Mark?
Yeah, second it.
Okay. Julie, could we have a roll call on that, please?
Yep. Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Dents,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili.
Yes.
Okay, moving down the agenda. Next item up is Executive Committee. The Executive Committee did not meet since the last meeting in May. And we may have to do one down the road here, but right now there's been no meeting, so no report on it. Next item is the Budget Committee. The Budget Committee did meet on June 8th, 2020. And I've been informed that everybody did get a copy of the notes or the minutes of the meeting that Andrew put together for us. Great job. Am I correct in assuming that everybody got a copy of that?
I received one. Yeah, it was very good.
Okay. How about the rest of the folks? Okay. I see you, Jeff.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Andrew, you want to go ahead and cover what you've put together for us? Briefly?
All right, okay. The first item different on the fiscal year 2020, 2021 budget. Barry explained to us that with the changeover to Cape Air, we will not be an alternative essential air service. It'll be an essential air service. So the Cape Air will be getting paid directly from the federal government, if I'm correct, Barry. Therefore, you will not see that in the budget for revenue, nor will you see the expense line item. It'll be all transacted directly from the federal government. State reimbursements are budgeted for $20,000, $10,000 for marketing, $8,000 for equipment, and $2,000, I believe that's for fire training.
Correct.
Office rent is budgeted to go up 6%, in line to match what was expected to be an increase for Cape Air. So in accordance with rules and regulations, Orchard Beach would have to be charged the same rate as we would be charging to Cape Air. Rent and landing fees was budgeted to increase by 6%. Passenger facility charges are basically going slightly down due to anticipated lower travel demand. Fuel sales also are going down due to lower travel demand. And then this budget is proposing a request to the county of a 5% increase in funding to help offset some of the maintenance costs that are going to continue going up due to lack of a capital budget. And then the other big change is airline marketing. I know Cape Air, I believe, had a $50,000 projection in their bid, but as Barry explained, that was more money that they're going to spend on advertising, not money that they're going to provide to the airport to control and spend on advertising.
I'm hoping that over time we can move the pendulum on that, but that is where we're starting from.
I have a general question. What are the connections still between the feds and our airport authority?
In regards to funding, I guess, is that?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
We've built them into our previous budgets and things, and now it's totally separate. So
correct, because
I just wonder if there's still any ties. If they are, what are they? Kind of.
Realistically, no. And that's one of the 8 years ago or 9 years ago when, we were as an airport on board talking about going down the path of alternate essential air service. That was one of the more minor reasons, is that we're part of that process. But under standard EAS, which is what the proposal of Cape Air and our direction in previous meetings to follow, is that is ultimately just a contract between DOT and the airline. We are not a party to that contract. We're not involved in funding. We're just kind of a third party who's interested in how that works, but we're not directly involved other than having the ability to write the letter of support that we did. So that's
Okay,
why that change in budget is being the vehicle through whom the funding flows. We're now just an outside bystander watching it.
so when you sell a ticket, it's going to be the feds that are going to sell it, and the feds are going to get the income. Is that right, or not?
Cape Air will.
Cape Air. Okay, Cape Air. So Cape Air will be probably working to some degree with the feds then, I suppose, right?
Yes, because they're ultimately they're going to be signing a contract. I don't know if it's structured as a grant or how exactly those are structured. But yes, those two parties will enter the agreement to provide our air service.
In general, Barry, is this a very good process or good arrangement?
Pros and cons, like a lot of things. You know, it potentially could lessen my workload because I don't really have any say in anything anymore, nor do we have any say in anything anymore. So that's a good thing, potentially less workload. Bad thing is we don't have any say. So, you know, there's no one really we can hold over a barrel saying you're not following our contract because we're not a party to this.
Okay, and the reason that the feds are running this now is that there's not enough activity coming out of our airport, or?
Nope, it's just the decision we made to go back into standard essential air service from the alternate essential air service program that we were operating under.
Major pros or cons?
Again, that's kind of the biggest. You know, some of the other differences are in kind of, they operate under slightly different rules, none of which really impact us too much. So, I mean, all of the bids we were looking at were standard essential air service bids. So,
Okay, how about bids on capital improvements? You know, who goes through that?
those are unrelated to airline.
Okay, would we handle that then, or is that going to be the feds involved in that, or?
It depends on the type of capital improvement project. So, for example, the runway resurfacing, which we completed between our last meeting and this meeting, that was a federally funded project. So they're heavily involved in that, and the state as well, because the state kind of, in Michigan, since we're a block grant state, the state ends up doing a lot of the paperwork on our behalf. But if it's a smaller project that's not federally funded, then it's completely our own process.
Okay, so that's part of why I asked the question, is that, you know, we had a significant amount of federal funds coming in for a lot of projects in the past. And I don't know if that's going to diminish substantially, or if it'll still be a good source of funds and support.
Well, the funding hasn't changed materially. So as it relates to the airline, it's just going directly to the airline, Cape Air in this case, as opposed to through us. The amount of funds, actually, Cape Air's bid was about $3.5 million, whereas Public Charters was previously at $3 million. So that funding is actually going up.
Mm-hmm.
As it relates to capital improvements, all we really control, or we are sure of, is the $150,000 a year that we get essentially guaranteed for those programs. But the projects we have demand or have a need for much more than that. So when those funds are available, or the priority of our project is such that it scores higher than other projects in our region, then we pull in extra federal capital funds to do those projects.
Barry, just listening, the Fed money doesn't really, it's not affected whether we're under alternate essential air or just essential air.
For capital improvement, correct.
Okay, that's what I think. Mark, is that what you were asking? It's the same either way.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, is that, will we
Right.
still see the revenues, or the, not revenues, I guess, the funds that would provide a variety of projects. So apparently we'll probably have as good a shot under the process we're going with now, or going back to the essential air service.
Yep, it should not
Right.
be how we're receiving our airline service.
Thank you.
Okay. Andrew, you want to continue?
All right, on the expense side, gas and oil is budgeted to be a little bit lower than previous years, as were sales, so expenses should be down if fuel sales are down. Again, the contractual expenses here for Cape Air, that's not going to be, as was just discussed, direct payment from the federal government to Cape Air, so that won't be a pass-through here. Contractual management, this is the annual salary for the airport director. So in the previous budgets and the previous boards agreed to an increase to which the airport director did not receive and did not obtain that increase for 2019 or 2020, I believe. So what was asked for was a cost of living adjustment for the last 2 years, plus the 1% per year, since he did not get the previous agreed upon raise. So the cost of living for 2018 was 2.8, cost of living for 2019 was 1.6. So that was 4.4, and then just to make it a flat amount, the budget committee is recommending to the board that we just make it a 6.66% increase to take it to 48,000 even. Contractual maintenance, this is Orchard Beach. So this is for, if I'm explaining this right, Barry, this is for the Part 139 contract and for the fixed operator contract. So the request is for a 4.4% increase, which is in line with the cost of living for 2018 and 2019. Training for the firefighters is only $2,000 in the budget because there's no on-site training. Advertising is $25,000 with $10,000 through a state grant, $15,000 from the airport. Repairs and maintenance was increased budget-wise slightly, but probably is still understated based off of the lack of capital funding. And then the miscellaneous expenses, PSP, this was kind of just touched on. The airport director is not expecting any big federal matching for 2020, 2021.
And Jeff, you might want to weigh in on this too, but we've been requested at the county that let's see what I got here. The funding of $5,000, which was 6%, I believe, increase, and that would be used to be for major projects, maintenance, equipment that is running, it's not in good shape, either can be repaired or have to be replaced. So I don't know how big a struggle that's going to be at the county, but you know, Jeff, I'll weigh in on this, but we'll include that and see what we can do with that.
Yeah, I'll just add into that, Mark, and everyone else on the meeting, is that we will request the budget and see what happens as the dust settles, no different than we have in years past.
Okay.
It does not hurt to request the extra 5,000 additional.
Sounds good to me.
And Jerry, if I could just touch on the last part of that was
Go
we
ahead.
had
Go ahead.
a rather lengthy discussion because this was all new to me, being involved in the budget committee for the first time, was the actual wording and interaction between the three different contracts, in that there's the airport director agreement, which does not contain the same language for the term, nor does it continue on as cleanly as the Part 139 and the fixed base operator agreement do on a month-to-month basis, if not completely renewed or terminated. There's some language that I think should be cleaned up and made consistent amongst them. And I guess my concern that I raised was, as somebody that doesn't run an airport, and if there's turnover at the county level, as we experienced last year with the gentleman that came in to debate the meaning of maintenance and repair, I just don't know that it's very clean right now amongst these three agreements, as to the fact that all three agreements are with essentially the same party. And you could argue that the way the agreements are written now, that Barry would have to get two separate insurance policies, because the airport director agreement requires him to carry insurance, and then the Part 139 and fixed-based operator also require it. And there's some confusion in the contracts between, in the airport director, he's certifying that he has no employees, which as airport director he doesn't, but as Orchard Beach he does.
Can they be combined? Is it possible or not?
I'm going to say I don't have the history on that, but my guess is perhaps at one time they were combined, and someplace or another they separated out as they are now, probably because of the creation of the Part 139 deal.
That's correct.
Classified, is that correct?
Yes,
Somewhat.
approximately 2005, when we became a Part 139 airport, that additional agreement was layered on top of the existing agreements.
So I guess before the 139 was layered on, there was just the airport director agreement and the fixed base agreement.
Correct.
Okay.
Although some of the language, I suspect that Mr. Gentile is pointing out, probably was unclear even when just those two agreements existed.
I would tend to agree, because just looking at the airport director's agreement there, it looks like it's kind of like, I'm trying to describe perhaps like a two-step deal where it says, if this happens, this is how it goes. If that doesn't happen, this is how it goes. But it's not separated clearly to show you that distinction. So I'm not quite sure how to.
Well, I guess I'll just add or chime in here with the fact that the report we're dealing with right now is the Budget Committee. The Budget Committee reviewed these because the Budget Committee needed to make a recommendation on the budgeted amounts for these contracts. Technically, as the board has operated in the past, the executive committee would be working on revising these contracts between now and when new versions would need to be executed, which would be October 1st. So I think in some ways this is Mr. Gentile making notes of that discussion so that they don't get these ideas and concepts that were discussed at the Budget Committee don't get lost when the Executive Committee picks it up, since he is not on the Executive Committee.
So will there be a separate contract on every project then too? Is that pretty much the case?
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you receive money from something, they usually want to write up an agreement. So if the agreement with the feds or some other entity or a private business or something like that, I'm just wondering how we'll handle that.
Yes, I mean, pretty much every project over a small size that we do, especially anything that's getting grant funding, we have contracts with, and those all go to the board for approval.
Individual ones.
Mark, you're not talking about the 3 contracts we have going on right now between Berry and Orchard Market, right?
No, I'm not, Jerry. I'm not talking about those. So it's just in general, as projects come up and things, and there's going to be a contract on it. I'm just wondering if it's just going to be a simple, innocent, separate contract for each situation. And apparently that's the case.
I would think what has been going on will continue to go on, right, Barry?
Yes.
You're right. Mark, did you hear that?
Yep, I did. Yes.
You know, what we've been doing in contracts and so on, you know, the board still votes on it and okays it for either me as a chair to sign or a chair, whoever it might be, to sign, or okays for Barry to sign.
Yeah, it's just like the airport director agreement, the Part 139 agreement, and the fixed base operator agreement. They're all separate agreements.
Right, and they'll all have to be agreed upon by the board.
By the board? Yep.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. So Barry, I like that summary, what you just talked about, but this is where we put together from the budget committee and are recommending then to the executive board and to the budgeting board and so on to follow through with these increases and these numbers we've presented. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
And Jerry, if I can just chime in, what Barry's saying is accurate. I'm not saying there's anything wrong or right with the current agreements. I'm just suggesting that in order to better budget and forecast and have a complete understanding of what's going on, the executive committee probably needs to take this up either with outside counsel and the airport director to try and clean up the current language in the current arrangements. And as the airport director suggested, I think it would make sense that they were tied in from a time period to coincide with the Cape Air agreements.
Right.
Good point. Good point.
Right, that's the other recommendation in there, to tie this next contract in with the airport director and the 139 and the fixed base to 2 years, which was tying it back into the contract with Cape Air.
And part of the rationale on that is the majority of the airport's income comes from our contract with the airline. So that for that period of time, those 2 years, we kind of know what broadly our budget is going to be like. So having other obligations of our expenses kind of align in time frame, then we're not caught in a situation where we've got expenses that go out at a certain level for more years than we know we're going to have income.
Okay. Any more discussion on what the budget committee presented and are presenting, is presenting? Okay, so we'll pass this on. Well, I'm just going to recap again that we are presenting for budgeting and purposes and so on, the $45,000, the increase for the airport director, Part 139, and fixed-based operator for those reasons. And also the increase from the county for the general fund, moving from 120,000 to 126, or a 5% increase. Otherwise, what was passed out with the minutes and so on for this meeting, everything balances on the budget. Okay, if there's no further discussion, we'll pass this information on to the executive committee and see if we can't straighten out some of the comments, concerns we have in these contracts, and go from there. Okay, the next item. Where we're at. Next item is the Capital Projects Committee. We did meet there, and we have some, okay, has everybody got, did everybody get a copy of the meeting minutes for the Capital Committee meeting? Barry, do you have a copy of that? Can you flash that over?
Just gonna ask whether you wanted me to bring up the minutes or the spreadsheet with the projects on it.
Let's do the minutes first, or either way, let's do the minutes first and we'll go from there. Okay, we had a capital meeting, a budget meeting on May 28th. Our first order of discussion was the Ted Aaron's hangar. And as we've got noted there, Mr. Aaron's has talked about turning his hangar over to the airport authority. Then in lieu of use of a T hangar for free until such time all the hangars are rented, and so on. The only thing in question is the door on Ted Aaron's hangar. In our discussions in the past, it has come up that the door needed some repairs, but we all aren't quite sure what the repairs are. So we contacted the local welding shop and had him come out, take a look at the door and try to piece together some kind of estimate for us for the repair of the door. And this is all because Cape Air has reached out for rental of the hangar, but we've got to make sure the door is functional. And I was just talking to Phil before the meeting. He has talked to the local welding shop and they have proposed a value of $20,000 to make the repairs. Not quite sure
22.
what it is. 22,000, was it?
22.
Okay. Not quite sure what's all involved. We'll have to explore that a little further. Part of the problem is that the skin or the sheeting on the door is going to have to be removed in order to take a good look at the door to see what might be rusted and what needs to be repaired. So right now it's really a very difficult estimate to make without thoroughly looking to see what you're making an estimate on.
Jerry, I got a question. Is there any other potential contractors that might want to put a bid in on this, or is it just this one?
We would have to explore to come up with an answer like you're talking about. We just did a shot in the dark with this one local welding shop, what's going on. And we may have to do that if somebody else is interested in doing it.
Well, and actually how I would explain that is what we asked of Manistee Welding in this case was that they come in not with the purpose of doing a bid, but kind of to give us an estimate. Because if we are going to do a project, if we are going to undertake this project, we would have to put it out for public bid. So just because of the size of it. So this was really just an estimate to give us a kind of an understanding as to the scope of the project, to then try to figure out how we would fund all of the other things once we kind of knew what the size approximately was.
Barry, I was just wondering on the revenues that would come in from that. I think we had some discussion on that in the past, but that I don't remember what that figure is. But if it's a wash, at least we get a new improved building, so to speak. If not, I don't know. So I just was wondering if we've got some. I guess the estimate is 22,000 is where we're at right now, I guess. And that's just a kind of a quick and dirty look, I guess, is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Or not?
Correct, correct. That's how I would term it, definitely. Quick and dirty.
Okay, and then have to try to have additional contractors bid on that, I
Correct.
suppose. Okay.
Correct. Now, when you're saying you balance this money with the funds we would get from Cape Air, is that what you're talking about, Mark?
Yeah, we want to at
Okay,
least break
right.
even or make money, but even if we have a cost on that and we have a first-class hangar, that's a big plus too.
Correct, correct. Yeah, and there's nothing in my mind to say that the local welding shop that gave us this rough number couldn't be one of the final bidders for the repair also.
I've been in business a long time.
Right. So anyway, that's where we set.
And something else I'll add to the discussion is, since we're mentioning Cape Air as a possible lessee, there's also a maintenance shop that is looking at possibly establishing a business operation here utilizing that hangar. I met with them on Saturday, and I think they're at the point of wanting to discuss and potentially negotiate a long-term arrangement with that hangar as well. So there really are two different business entities that are potentially interested in that hangar longer term.
They're kind of two different things though. So I'm wondering what the difference in revenues would be. One is to store something and the other one is to make repairs or produce things.
Correct. And I've actually been exploring with both parties the possibility of both uses happening in kind of a shared scenario under different things. So, because it would be beneficial for the big picture of the airport for both of those things to be happening, for the airline to have a place to park its hangar in the middle of winter to keep it out of the elements, and also for additional business activity here, which will bring increased traffic and increased overall activity to the airport. So both are desirable, but because we only have one hangar that can accommodate them right now, I'm trying to figure out if it would be possible for both to happen. And, first pass without any details, that's a possibility, but it may not make sense longer term once you get into the details.
So it might be possible you could house that operation and still be able to put a plane in there too, but you don't know at this point. So, but that might be a possibility, or it could be some sort of an attached operation outside that hangar too, maybe business.
There are different opportunities, but like a lot of things, the devil's in the details. Things like legal structure, who's actually owning. Is it a lease? There's so many things that may or may not make what on the surface might be physically possible just from a square foot point work or not work from a business point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Barry, what's a ballpark number for expected income from a lease of that size building?
I would say anywhere between 3,000 a year and 10,000 a year, depending on the type of arrangement.
So Barry, if it was Cape Air, what would we expect from them?
Well, the thing about Cape Air is they probably would only want it for, half of December, January, and February.
The winter months.
The winter months when
Okay.
for de-icing and keeping the plane out of the elements, it's most critical. And, I'd say probably $1,000 a month, if not a little bit more than that, would be reasonable for that.
For the
That's
winter
just
months.
that period of time, and then you have the rest of the year. Not saying that, they might not entertain having it, year-round, but their need is really that core winter months.
Okay. Okay, well, that's as far as we got on that. We're gonna have to explore this a little bit more. Have a couple more meetings to try to come up with a better direction or more direction. Next item was the T-hanger door requirements, replacements. We did have some old costs that we put together about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago now, for replacing the remaining T-hanger doors out there on the T-hanger. But then there was some dissatisfaction with the functionality of the existing door that we put up last year. We all went out there and viewed that. We all tended to agree that, yeah, we've got to make this one work as we think it should work before we go ahead and invest in any more doors for the other T-hangers. One of the items that we're looking at is modification of the door footings, because they might be very shallow and moving with the frost each winter. And right now, the door out there, the T-hanger is really not very usable because the door is really picked up from the bottom and jamming onto the top. So it's very difficult to open the door. So that's where we're standing on that. We're perhaps going to have to get a concrete contractor in to explain to them what we want to do. Cut out the existing footing, bring it down below frost line, and re-pour and see what happens. Any other comments on what we're looking at there?
Well, if we wanted somebody to come in and do that, I'm assuming we've got somebody who would know how to put in and how much concrete, et cetera, so we wouldn't have to have it more than once.
Correct, correct. Hopefully, what happens, that would have to follow on to the other doors, and the amount of concrete and what has to be done, I'm sure would be probably within a plus or minus 10% of the original one in terms of needs and how much is added to get below the frost line and things of that nature.
Is
Okay.
that one being used now or not? Or is it not possible to use in right now?
When I saw it the other day, Mark, it wasn't being used. Barry, it's not being used, is that correct?
We do not have demand for it right now.
Okay, okay. So the answer is it's not being used at the moment.
I see.
But as I said, the doors are difficult to open, but all the other doors and all those T-hangers are difficult to open. So it's just that it's a new door, and that makes it kind of exasperating that we spent the money on that. We didn't correct it. It was working fine last year because I went out there and looked at it, but apparently through the winter, frost heaved up the footing on it. And then capital funding. This capital funding note down to the bottom here kind of refers back to we don't have any funds available, and if we were to go ahead and do all the T-hanger doors at the moment, I think the cost was somewhere around just a little over around $100,000. So I know we don't have funding for that. So we would have had to go back to the county to perhaps get a loan, but we're not at that point in time right now. Any further questions on the capital project committee meeting notes, etc.? Okay, if not,
Actually, I do have a couple things I want to add. I'm going
okay,
to
go ahead.
share.
Oh, I forgot the other thing, Barry, I'm sorry.
The other documents.
Yep,
So this is kind of our, I don't say long-term, but kind of, you know, more than just this year and next year type, but looking out a little bit and trying to look at what our needs are for funding capital related projects. The top half of this spreadsheet is the projects that are generally not eligible for federal funding and therefore are 100% local funding. And then the bottom are our larger projects, which are federally funded, but we have a 2.5% federal match. Right now, as part of our kind of budgeting process, the money that comes in as part of our PFCs, we generally have historically allocated to these types of projects, sometimes supplemented with additional general fund revenue. And right now, the draft budget we just looked at has a number of $20,000 for next year for that. So that kind of gives you an idea as to the amount of money that we're typically working with, unless it is expanded through other means. And, you know, nothing about this is set in stone. This is really, you know, done for discussion and visibility so that the board is aware of what our long-term needs are. But if you look, you know, other than the current fiscal year where we're about $20,000 or $18,000 in total capital need, which is covered by our PFCs, as you go out in future years, that 20,000 doesn't really come close to covering anticipated capital expenditures. Now, these things can get pushed out longer over time. There's nothing that says any of these items have to happen in the year that they're in. In general, the priority order of what's higher in the list versus lower in the list is kind of, you know, agreed to by the committee when we looked at this. But this just kind of gives everyone a picture of, you know, where things stand. And, you know, you'll see, you know, 59,000, you know, the next 2 years. And a lot of that is doing some of this door work that was just talked about. But then you go out 3 years from now and you'll see 190,000 and you'll say, well, that's a really big number. Why is it so much bigger? And you look at our 2.5% match of coming in almost 80,000, or actually if you add them all up, you know, 110, like 140,000 is just our match, because in that time frame we're looking at a $5-6 million capital project for redoing our taxiway. And when you get numbers that big, 2.5% starts adding up. So this is really just looking toward the future for planning purposes. And it really ties back into the last comment in the minutes of that of the committee report.
Mark, I think earlier this morning you were asking about something like this. Is this what you were kind of looking for?
Yeah, I was kind of see if we had a copy of a page like this. And I know that in the past we had put together, in a sense, a planning list of projects to
Right.
do and try to get some estimate of the figure. So yeah, this is pretty much what I guess I was mentioning, really.
Okay.
Some big costs and some middle costs. Yeah.
Well, when you get something like this on paper, at least you got something to peck with or look
Absolutely.
at and subtract and add and so on too. But it's a start. It's not locked in concrete. But it's a start, and it's the best guess estimate for right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, any other comments on what was presented with the rest of the group?
Chairman, this is Andrew. I need to apologize, but I have to jump off at 1 o'clock for the tribal council meeting.
Okay, whenever you reach 1 o'clock, it looks like we're about 5 minutes away. Just go ahead and jump off.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for the report. Okay, Barry, it's your Airport Director's Report. Your
Okay.
turn.
There we go. Get that up in a second here. Share. Okay. So no airport incidents or accidents to report for the last month. Something that we didn't explicitly talk in the last set of conversations around budget and capital projects is that we are slated for this additional $30,000 in CARES money. That last month we had talked about potentially tapping that for the door repairs on the Ted Ahrens hangar. Now that we've got an estimate, you know, it still fits under that number, so that's a good thing. But I think we were all a little bit surprised that the estimate came in as high as it did. So this is additional funding that we weren't budgeting for that potentially allows us to tackle a project that we weren't planning to this year. I don't have any update as to when we might see that money. So stay tuned on that. I mentioned this last month, but it's something that I'm, watching is the way language is worded right now for Essential Air Service and the significant impact of our enplanements because essentially the near shutdown of aviation in the country. There is concern that under the current rules that we may become ineligible for Essential Air Service. I don't think we're the only ones that will fall into that, and therefore I'm anticipating that Congress will adjust things because of the situation, but it's something that I'm monitoring.
Is this, how are the feds determining that? By number of passengers or number of flights, or what are they doing?
It is a cap on the allowed subsidy per passenger. So the subsidy is essentially fixed. It's what, in our case, public charters through our alternate EAS grant, and now starting October 1st, Cape Air through their Essential Air Service grant gets, and you just divide that by the number of passengers. But when the number of passengers plummets to practically none, that subsidy per passenger skyrockets, and it's, certainly for the last couple of months, we've been well over that maximum when we're flying, less than 50 people for the entire month versus, around 1,000 for the month. It makes a huge difference in how that is calculated. So that's what that figure alludes to.
So you
But Barry,
think
everybody is kind of caught in this situation,
Everybody is caught in this situation.
right? So
Yes.
we'll have to see how it shakes out.
But
And
that doesn't mean that sometimes Congress, in their inaction, causes changes in policy that may be unintended.
won't the providers like Cape Air have a big voice in this as well? That's a lot of business to put out of jobs.
Yes, but there's lots of needs from lots of different sectors of the economy and impacts, and Congress is going to be, I think, busy, or should be busy, between now and the end of the calendar year. But I'm not sure they're actually able to actually do anything because of politics of an election year. So we'll see.
Okay.
Again, I'm just making you aware that there are these things going on so that, 3-4 months from now, as we get closer to the end of the year, you're not surprised if I raise this as a more of an emergency type issue at that point.
This CARES funds, that's no guarantee there. That may come up or may not, I guess, right?
No, the $30,000, I would say, is pretty much guaranteed. It's just for the grant and paperwork to flow through the various channels. I mean, the effort to basically do an individual grant to every airport in the country in a short time period has the bureaucracy has never accomplished anything remotely like that. So I'm not surprised it's taking a little bit longer than they hoped. Okay, moving on then to our passenger numbers. So as you can see, some of the things that drive that previous conversation are, pretty much a complete lack of passengers that we've seen through the kind of heart of the lockdown period, April and May. Things are definitely improving, turning around. We'll see at least a 10-fold increase in passengers, I think, in June over April and May, but still significantly down from where we were a year ago. And as we head into our peak travel of July and August, it's still too soon to really see how much things may come back. There's a lot of things in motion here right now. The good thing is, though, that Public Charters and Ultimate Jet, the operator, are doing a stellar job, even though there aren't a lot of passengers, no cancellations a second month in a row, and really only one delayed flight on the schedule in May. So, for
That's
what it's
good.
worth, some things are going well, even though no passengers are here to utilize it. Sorry, I cut someone off.
That might have been me, but I'm all set. I was just
Okay.
making a comment saying we're going forward.
Okay. So looking at airfares, in some ways, given that we've only got a couple months or a few months left with our current carrier, how things stand competitively under them isn't really as material as really looking forward to what things might be. That combined with the fact that just aviation in general right now is in turmoil and uncertainty, there's just things happening all over the board that are interesting. So I kind of just want to highlight here, just looking at the Traverse City average numbers, they were this month versus last month is, the average fare dropped by $400 a ticket from just about $700 to just under $300. And Muskegon kind of likewise about a 50% drop. We, on the other hand, our average fare went up $100. It's just kind of all over the board right now as to where things stand. I actually think that this month is a little bit closer to normal than last month. I think last month was really the outlier. And you'll kind of see the pattern that we've been seeing where Grand Rapids is always the least expensive in the region. Traverse City for the last 18 months or so has been second least expensive. And then Muskegon and us, kind of hanging out there being more expensive than the others. Now, and again, as I started by talking about this, that's kind of current carrier, what might we see? So the last column, the airport code UIN, that is Quincy, Illinois, which is a Cape Air city. Those are the flights on Cape Air through Chicago, which would mirror our service on their American Airlines code share. And you'll actually see that, you know, in this snapshot, those American Airlines code share fares actually were less than what the average fare out of Grand Rapids is. Not by much. So optimistically, if American decides to price our market like the Quincy market, and from a cost perspective, it's the same. I mean, it's, you know, we're both small airports, about the same distance from O'Hare, connecting through O'Hare in an essential air service market. You know, I think there could be some better days ahead of us as it relates to pricing.
Right.
However, Americans' formulas may be very different. They may look at our region and say we're a more lucrative region for them and they can afford to charge more up here. I don't know how their formulas work or what really drives them. What I'm going to be looking for as we go down this path and get these American fares in the system is, as long as we are no more expensive than Traverse City, you know, I'm fine with that because it kind of makes sense. We're, you know, 2 meters into Chicago. I think it would be optimistic for us to be less expensive than Traverse City. But, you know, certainly if there's any room for our input into trying to direct that, I'd love to be halfway between the American price out of Grand Rapids and Traverse City, since we're halfway between in distance-wise. But we'll see. Some data points, how much value they have, I don't know, but we're starting to look forward to some of these hopefully interesting conversations in the future. Any questions on any of that?
Not a question, Barry, just a comment. I was looking for flights today with Delta out of Grand Rapids to Houston, and those prices have gone up in the last few weeks. I'm looking at basically 440 and change right now if I was to book one of those.
Okay.
And out of Manistee to Houston, it's a fraction of that.
Interesting. Okay. And yep, and that's some of the mystery of airfares, is how they change and ebb and flow. Okay.
Okay.
So moving on to my next slide. So summer schedule has been open for sales for a while now. I would say a week ago yesterday, so Sunday a week ago, it's kind of like someone just turned on the faucet and people started booking again, reservations.
Wow. Good news.
You know, that Sunday, so Sunday the 7th of June, we sold 34 seats that day, which is the most on a Sunday since mid-August of last year. So people are starting to book, which is good. Some of that I think is just pent up demand. So it's not necessarily an indicator of future demand, as that kind of pent up demand gets kind of as they purchase, because they've kind of been on the sidelines for a while now. But it's certainly moving in a much less negative direction. So the reservations, so currently you can book through the end of Public Charter's contract, September 30th. You will not be able to book beyond September 30th until DOT formally awards Cape Air the contract, and then they publish their schedule, which I've already been talking with them, should be an order of, you know, like 3 days after DOT awards. You should probably be able to buy tickets on them. But, you know, we're kind of in a holding pattern until that happens. The summer schedule has daily flights with the jet and planned to be 4 times a week, second flights on the Beech 1900. That summer schedule starts this week, so we are currently scheduled for 2 flights a day on Thursday and Friday this week, as well as Sunday and Monday next week as kind of our first weekend of our summer schedule. And given what I was told on Friday, we should see the Beech 1900 on Thursday to operate that second flight.
Well, we should be taking some pictures of that or something like that because
We
we've been
should.
talking about this
2
since
years
January.
later,
Right.
but everyone in this building has the mindset, I'll believe it when I see it. So
Okay.
I'm passing on what I was told. I am optimistic, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Well, he's
There
had a lot of,
on that?
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Two of you were talking at the same time.
Barry, go ahead.
Is there a pool going on that?
No, no pool.
I mean,
We all would have lost by now if we were.
I mean, all the reasons for not having the Beech 1900 in the air by such and such a time, I think Jim has come up with a great number of different ones.
Yes.
Very, very unusual ones. Anyway, that'd be great. Make sure we have that.
Okay, other things going on. So our PFAS, we're still waiting on paperwork for our state agreement on the final portion of our funding for our equipment, our testing equipment that we got a grant for last year. And I had mentioned last month that this year, as part of the state budget, Eagle, in cooperation with MDOT, had a $4 million allocation to do environmental testing for PFAS at all airports that are known to have had the product on premise in the past. And as part of that, we worked with Prina Newhoff, our consultant, to put together a grant proposal for $242,000 to do that testing. It involves, I think, 3 different testing wells being drilled and a number of other activities as part of this study to understand the scope of the environmental contamination with these substances at airports across the state.
Barry, haven't we done that before? Didn't
No,
we do this once before or not?
nope.
Not with PFAS.
There
Well, you
have
couldn't,
been,
you
there
couldn't
have
have
been a
done it.
variety of environmental things that have come up over the last couple of years. When we purchased the Adamczyk property, there was some contamination of used oils and a burn pit and things like that. So there was that iteration there. A year ago, we purchased some equipment that allows us to do our required testing of our firefighting foam without the product being dispersed into the environment. But this is really the first time of any, project to look at any potential contamination from past uses of firefighting foam on the airport proper.
Okay, I thought there was something to do with water and, either water flowing through or something like that, but maybe not.
I may have talked about that in the past because that is a concern. Is we have a city water well in the middle of the airport, and therefore if there is contamination, those types of things are part of this testing and study, is to really look at what we know exists and then where we think it's migrating, and does it jeopardize down the road 10, 20, 30 years the city water well.
Barry, to your knowledge, do you know whether the city has tested the water from this well for
Yes.
PFAS?
Yes, the city is under their guidance. Yes, they have been testing and there is no indication of contamination,
So it's negative.
at least at
now.
levels that are,
Right.
detectable or of a concern.
Okay.
Oh, that's good.
'Cause I
But
would
it's
say
really
other-
more monitoring areas where there may be contamination and seeing how it is potentially migrating through soils and
Right.
groundwater. That is a lot of the work of this grant.
Because I would say that if they did have a positive detect for PFAS, they would have turned off production from this well.
Yes, yes.
Right.
And right now, about half of the city's water comes from our well, so.
Oh, good, good.
No update on the fuel system monitors. Gate repairs have been completed, so we can now, tenants can now enter and exit appropriately. We've already gone through in detail Ted Aaron's hangar and updates around that, so
Okay.
it was just a placeholder in case there was something I wanted to add. You know, it's kind of, you know, we talk about a lot of things that are, you know, negative and challenges, but it's nice when something goes well. So our major runway construction project went very smoothly from May 26th through June 5th. You know, the weather really cooperated. The 2 days of rain we had, neither of them really impacted construction in any significant way. They were mostly evening or overnight weather events. They finished a little bit early. We, you know, reopened the airport a bit ahead of schedule. It went really well. There are still 2 items outstanding on that contract. They need to come back because what they have right now are temporary markings on the runway. They can't put final markings on until new asphalt's set for 30 days to ensure good long-term adherence. And then there's a little sub-project here to install some signs, and we're waiting on those from the manufacturer before they can be installed. We did get a little bonus, and that is the parking lot got crack sealed under this project. There was an allotment of so many linear feet of crack sealing for the overall project, and it was intended to be used after they took the layer that they were replacing off. Any cracks they found in the sub layers were going to get sealed, but the underlying pavement was actually in really good condition, so they didn't use those budgeted amounts. So we found another area of the airport that could use them, and so we got a really nice job of crack sealing done on the parking lot, and it has been something that I've been in the back of my mind. Another one of those, you know, local capital improvement projects that I was, you know, struggling to figure out how we'd ever get paid for, and we were able to get it done under this project. There was one minor casualty in that there was, because we were closed down for airline service, there were very few cars in the parking lot, which actually made it really an ideal time to do this. But one of the cars that was there did get a broken back window as a result of a rock getting kicked up by the work and thrown through it. So right now it's sitting out there wrapped in plastic. We figured out who owned the car. They're working with the contractor, insurance companies are talking, so everything's being taken care of. But it was kind of an unfortunate event that happened in an otherwise, you know, really good bonus that we had.
Sorry, just one comment.
Yep.
When I was, you know, you told me about the crack sealing the other day, which was a great deal, the way you handled that. But we also have some asphalt that needs to be replaced out there on the entrance to the airport. Is that
Yep.
correct? Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Well, they couldn't repair it. I mean,
at the very entrance to the airport where the sidewalk meets the
Right,
parking
right.
lot, there's an area that's starting to crumble because of basically it heaves at different levels in the winter because the sidewalk piece actually has embedded sidewalk melters, ice melters. So that
Okay.
doesn't freeze, but the parking lot freezes. So they kind of go at different levels, and that's creating an issue there. I actually,
So-
during this project, I took our consultant out there and just said, here, look at this. I don't want you to really think about it right now, but if in the future there's a way we can get this included in some future project, you at least know that it exists, and we can hopefully figure out when. It's not like the pavement's falling apart. It's just cracked. From my concern, it's more of a visual, and what it's saying, to people coming into our airport is right front and center. You've got this kind of pavement that's starting to fail, but there's no really significant issue that warrants.
But I guess my point for bringing that up is that is where that extra 5% on the general fund on our budget is going to be used. It's a source, it's a reason.
Okay.
That's a reason right there. I pointed that out because that's the reason why we want 5% there.
Okay. Moving on, I don't have any updates on these two other projects right now. Air service, I've probably touched on most of this already. This is actually, I think, an interesting note is what I'm seeing right now is people, even though we're getting a more reasonable number of people booking, they're all booking really close in for flights, a week to 2 weeks out, as opposed to a more typical, 30 to even 60 days being kind of when people are booking. I think just with all of the uncertainty, no one's making long-term plans right now. And, they're just really following up on short-term needs.
I would tend to agree with you on that.
I'm not seeing really anyone booking past essentially, the 4th of July period. No one's booked in September, and for the entire month of September, there's only 4 people booked, and I don't think anyone's booked in September probably since March. And August pretty much the same way. So we'll see how that evolves as we go through the summer. Right now, I'm anticipating, we're halfway through June, kind of at the rate people are booking for the rest of June, that will end up at about 35% or roughly 1/3 of the passengers we did a year ago, which in any other circumstance would be, horrible. But that compares to in April, we were at 2% of what we did a year ago. And in May, we did 6% of a year ago. So we're going in the right direction there. And to put our numbers in context of what's going on at the national level, is yesterday's number was basically the high so far in the recovery, I'll call it, where nationwide we did 21% of the same number of passengers on that date a year prior. And that compares to the low in April of 4%. So, we're in the same ballpark as the entire aviation industry in the country is doing. As it relates to wrapping up our EAS selection process, we're still waiting on DOT's final award of service to hopefully Cape Air. I'm still expecting that in July, which would be their typical time frame. In talking with Cape Air on Friday, I'm going to put in a call to DOT either today or tomorrow when I get a chance, and really just to kind of start feeling as to when they might be making a decision, because we all want it sooner rather than later, because we can't get a schedule published, and therefore people can't really start booking until DOT does their award.
Or you haven't gotten any requests for extra information or any
Nope.
Negative feedback or anything?
Nope. I've
good.
had no communication from DOT,
Okay,
which is typical. That's not atypical. That's typical. But I'm going to reach out and just
right. I think that's a wise move.
make sure.
Right.
So Cape Air. So even though Cape Air is not officially selected, and every time I talk to anyone at Cape Air, they start the conversation by, we don't want to be presumptuous on what DOT is going to do, but let's talk. So again, I'll say the same thing. This is all kind of assuming DOT does certain things. That's not a guarantee, but I'm fairly confident that that will be the case. So far, I've had phone calls with multiple phone calls with their marketing group. I've had one conversation with their internal IT group, their station director, who would be basically overseeing their employees here, and then their planning group, which does their scheduling and aircraft and things like that. I've basically been pretty much introduced to everybody that over time I hope to be working with over the last 2 weeks now. So that's all good. And I'm going back here. So the station director, his name's Matt, and I can't think of his last name right now. It's an interesting coincidence, hopefully, and hopefully we can make something happen of this, is I had reached out to Cape Air and just said, given our rental car situation, and it was a really frustrating week because of the 8 rental cars we have, 4 of them were in the shop with everything imaginable under the sun not working. And just really frustrated that we don't have any quality rental car service. And that is a limitation for airlines, because people coming into our community, if they don't have people they're meeting or working with or friends and family, they don't have transportation if they don't have a rental car. So I reached out to Cape Air and just said, do you have any contacts, or have you experienced the same situation in any other, airport that you've started service with? And this, the regional director who oversees their stations, he and I hooked up because it turns out he is a former executive at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And his wife actually still works for Enterprise. They live in St. Louis, which is where Enterprise is headquartered. She's an attorney in Enterprise's legal team. So he's working his contacts to try to stir up, hopefully, some interest from Enterprise. Now is not a good time for the rental car industry. You may have heard that Hertz has declared bankruptcy. Another smaller firm has also declared bankruptcy. People aren't flying, therefore they're not renting rental cars. Rental cars are a very high capital industry because you've got all of these assets that you're paying on, and if your revenue dries up, immediately that puts you in a really bad situation. So the stars may not align for us on Enterprise, just because it's not a time they're maybe even contemplating looking at expanding anywhere. But we do have some avenues that we're pursuing on that.
Good.
And then on marketing. So we're in the process of relaunching all of our marketing now that A, demand is starting to creep back. B, things have stabilized with the airline. They're operating a good, flawless schedule. Last week, our Google AdWords got turned back up. Our Facebook ads got turned back on. And I was anticipating us getting out an email newsletter last Friday, but it will happen sometime the first half of this week. And then we're starting the process of, I've had a couple meetings with Right Side Design on this during the last month, of a website redesign, looking at how to incorporate Cape Air as our carrier into that website design. things that are coming out of our planning process of that is really a focus on our interline and code share ticketing that we now have with, or will have with Cape Air, and really trying to figure out ways of making that, first and foremost, right in front of your eyes, so that people are knowing that they can now do things they haven't been able to. Cape Air potentially gives us some new integration points, having like a list of today's scheduled arrivals and scheduled departures in kind of like a real-time scenario. We're looking at that. And then one of the basis of the whole website redesign is what we're using really goes back to about 8 years ago as far as its technology platform. So we're needing to kind of move it forward to newer web technologies as things have evolved over the last 8 years. And we've been working with Right Side Design, and our website has been implemented through them. That is the end of my report. Are there any questions?
Not for me, Barry. Pretty thorough.
Good report.
Any other comments, questions for Barry? Okay. Moving on then to old business, unfinished business. I'm not aware of any unless somebody has something that's hasn't been brought up. Phil, did
Not
you
for
have
me.
something? Okay, we'll move on then. Moving on to new business. I think.
I don't think we have any action on this. I put it on the agenda not knowing what was going to come out of our
What are you
estimate
talking about, Barry?
thing. So
What are you talking about? New business?
under new business, the Aaron's Hangar.
Right. I was just going to say, I think we've discussed that pretty thoroughly at the moment.
Yep. I was thinking we might want to take some action at this point, but I don't think, given what we now know, that we're ready to do that. So
Correct. Okay, the draft budget approval, which was attached.
So
or,
my understanding, and I see Susan is still on the call, muted, is that this week the county commissioners are really starting their budget discussions. So essentially the budget process for us is to get a draft to the county so that they can start doing their work with our budget integrated with everything else, all the other county departments and services that they're trying to look at to see where we fit.
okay.
So that is why the committee has worked, put together this draft, and with the goal of this board adopting a draft budget today. Again, the key word being their draft. The final budget would be approved toward the end of the fiscal year, but this is really giving a blessing that this is what we're looking at to hand off to the county, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. So I'm all in favor of taking a little vote. That would help us to move forward to say we have a draft prepared, as we discussed already, and that's what we want to move forward with. Does that sound like a reasonable thing to do?
It does.
Okay, do I hear a motion then to move forward with our proposed draft budget that we discussed earlier and which was attached to the airport agenda for this Monday?
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
Support.
okay. Julie, could we have a vote on that then, please? Julie?
We're not hearing you, Julie.
Here I am. Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Mr. Dents,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Gentile's gone. Mr. Bergstrom.
Mark Bergstrom, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we're down to any comments by board members.
Barry, I just got one. It's a bit on a personal note. As I mentioned earlier, looking at booking air travel for the towards the end of August. Is that is still not going to be an issue with our current North Country sky?
No, I wouldn't see any issue with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mark, any comments?
No, I really think it's gone pretty well. It's been a pretty lengthy meeting with a lot of issues and actions and things, and I'm tired.
Okay, okay, we'll adjourn here in a minute, then you can go take a nap if you want.
There we
Take a
go.
walk. Take a walk.
Sounds good.
Okay, Phil, any comments?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, Barry Peterson?
Just thanks to the committees for the work they've done. Good job.
Okay, well, we got to start. We're not done yet. I want to see if we can't grind on through a few more of these things and at least air out some of the things so we don't have to go through this again next time around, or as much anyway. Okay. I'm going to say meeting adjourned then.
All right,
Thank you. Thank you for everyone showing up.
you bet.